So yes, my name is Tiit Oidjärv, and for 7 years now already I've been working at the policy level of spatial planning at the ministry in various roles, and also dealing with some national spatial plans and legislation and policy issues. But I'm not talking just as a ministry representative here today. I've also just recently conducted a study while studying at the University of Gothenburg in Sweden, working with European policy issues, and what I was interested in was how these, just to focus a little from the SDG discourse to more narrow environmental goals. So how these that are often agreed on a supranational level, how do these translate, and how are these accounted for in local level and land use planning? So and there are some interesting findings in the study I conducted, so I'd be happy to share these with you. So yeah, I think one of the added values of what I did, and what you also see on the next slide is working through a lot of previous addresses and also the Green Deal in identifying the environmental goals that are more related to land use planning. And I'm using the term land use planning here. I think in many instances it is meaning the same thing as spatial planning, but just to be quite focused on actually what a lot of countries are doing still, which is defining the allowed land use through planning documents and through a legislative, through a process that is defined in legislation. There's also, of course, integrated spatial planning and all these other discourses, but yes, I just wanted to focus quite strictly on land use planning, because that is still a large part of what defines our land use. So yes, one of the things I did was combining these two issues, the environmental goals and land use planning. So how can land use planning actually, in theory at least, contribute to various environmental goals? What I then did was I conducted a study among local level Estonian and Finnish land use planners, both the ones working in local administration, but also planning consultants. Unfortunately, there were not that many answers. The totally 83 responses I got, but still it was sufficient to conduct at least some quantitative analysis as well. And one more thing I think that was quite interesting was the factors that support or hinder accounting for these environmental goals in local level land use planning. And I was, of course, looking for also the European dimension in this, but just yeah, I didn't find it, just quite shortly. I'm sorry for this fine print, but it's a long list of all the environmental goals that I linked to land use planning. Yes, it's 24 actually, if I remember correctly. So actually, on this slide they are listed to in the ranking that came out of the survey. So the ones on the top are considered to be more important and considered to be accounted for more often in land use planning decisions by the planners. And then the ones that are down below, those are not considered to be accounted for not that often. I think some of these are actually quite interesting, and especially the ones that are further down below. For instance, the ones that I highlighted now, for instance, reducing soil cover, which is also part or at least mentioned in the Green Deal, and which is an issue in many countries, not necessarily perhaps in Finland and in Estonia, but still in the middle parts of Europe that are more densely populated, and it is a large part of land use policy in many countries, was not considered to be reported to be considered in land use planning decisions, but also some of the other ones, for instance, reducing greenhouse gas emissions or finding ways to produce new renewable energy, which I think these are quite noteworthy, that actually the planners said that yes, we don't account for these in land use planning decisions too often. So just to move forward, also from these, from the environmental goals or targets that were noted on the previous slide, quite significant patterns emerged also on what was the background of the respondents. So these all are statistically significant also. So planners in Finland versus Estonia, in urban versus rural municipalities, larger municipalities, and working with comprehensive rather than detailed planning reported to account for environmental goals more. And of course, the interesting part is, again, the ones that do not report to account for environmental goals that much. So people working with detailed planning and in smaller municipalities and rural municipalities and in Estonia versus Finland. Because of the way I conducted my study, it's not. I did have quite good open comments as well as responses, but yes, I mostly included the statistical side on these slides because those are, I think, quite important in themselves already. Then just briefly, another long list, sorry for that, about the potential factors that could support or hinder accounting for environmental goals in local land use planning. Again, the list is basically the higher the factor, the more the planners considered it to be like supporting accounting for environmental goals. And there are also patterns here. I think what is most noteworthy is the factors that are basically closer to planners or closer to the local municipality level were considered to be more supporting or more important by the planners. So basically benchmarking with other municipalities, clearly set environmental goals and targets on the municipality level, and of course more financial resources, but also this guidances and good examples of plans where it has actually been done, basically. And the ones I was hoping to find because of what I was actually looking for, all the multi-level governance issues, were considered to be not that important. So commitment to environmental goals on the European level and also national level commitment, like political commitment, was not considered to be that important. Again, quite interesting findings for me. So, but I don't think I have too much time left, so just a few reflections I would like to give. There's a lot more in this data, and it is really quite interesting. Unfortunately, yes, the sample could have been a little bigger to allow for more profound statistical analysis, but that was the case. What can you do? So I think what was the added value of the study is actually combining the different environmental goals based on various sources that have been found to be linked to have some link to land use planning. And actually in the open comments that it was also commented that it is a good list in itself to see what can land use planning actually do. And still, I would like to re-emphasize that the patterns are quite interesting still, so that statistically, some groups just report to consider environmental goals more than others. I think from a policy making point of view, I think the detailed planning, I think you all know what that means. It's not the comprehensive level planning, but actually working with a few land plots or a small area to define the land use. I think that's something that that is quite, let's say, scary, because that is actually the level of planning where actually the spatial decisions are made and the solutions are actually implied. Of course, there's the construction phase as well that can do a lot and does a lot, but if planners report not to consider environmental goals that often in detailed land use planning, then that's quite significant, I feel. And of course, clearly the support and commitment on the municipality level was a strong supporter. Yes, and then there were also quite interesting inputs from the open comments as well, such as we all know that the local council just wants the plan enforced, and they don't care about the environmental goals. We want a new dwelling area, basically, or a new residential area. So those kinds of comments are always nice to read, even though you heard the same thing many times before, again, in practice. And one interesting finding that I certainly cannot prove to be right or wrong, but that seems to be the case a little bit, that there might be a dichotomy between the discourse of the Green Deal and various environmental agreements, that all contributions should go to reaching certain environmental goals, versus the discourse of land use planning, that you should consider everything. You should consider everybody's priorities, all the sectors and so on. So it is definitely not a one-way situation or one-way practice that everything has to contribute to one goal. So there might be something there. It would definitely require some further research. And one more thing that is puzzling to me, working at the spatial planning policy level at the ministry, is basically if this is the case, if these results are correct, which I believe them to be, so who should act, basically? Which policymaker should act based upon these? Because it cannot be solved by spatial planning policy alone, definitely. It basically doesn't make much difference what you put in spatial planning legislation, in the Planning Act. Yes, we could do, such as, I think what's one difference between Finland and Estonia is that the importance of environmental, of a good status of environment is stated somewhat more clearly in the Finnish legislation, but still there are borders. It has to be a contribution from taxation, from transport policy, and so on. So everything has to contribute. It's not just the spatial planning alone. But thank you very much. It was a master's thesis, and it's fully downloadable. The link can be found here also. I'm also working on making it a publication. Fortunately, hopefully that will be the case sometime. And yes, if you should want to contact me, then do use my personal email for some time, because I'm leaving the ministry for now. Thank you very much.